Hello folks and welcome to my video countdown for 5 crazy ways Game of Thrones has had an impact on individuals and groups of people in the real world. More specifically, this countdown will focus on the more outrageous or wild side of the Game of Thrones fandom manifesting itself in our world, and as such there will be some mature content to this video, so viewer discretion is advised. Anyway, without further ado, here are 5 crazy ways Game of Thrones has impacted the real world.
Number 5. Sex and porn. From pornography to Craigslist ads, Game of Thrones has had a very real effect in the realm of adult pleasures. Game of Thrones has the distinction of having 3 pornographic spin-off parodies released thus far. These include Game of Bones, This Ain't Game of Thrones XXX, and Gay of Thrones, the last being evidently in a different niche than the first two. However, porn is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Game of Thrones and real-world sexual entertainment. In 2003, a self-proclaimed avid fan of Game of Thrones had purchased a replica of the Iron Throne and wanted to recreate one of her adult fantasies based off of the series. As such, she proceeded to post an ad on Craigslist in which she requested a, quote, Robb Stark lookalike to worship her, as she would be posing as Daenerys Targaryen, the Mother of Dragons. Of particular note is that the posting ends with a statement that has become quite notorious in the Game of Thrones fandom. It states, quote, I am looking for a Stark in the streets, but a wildling in the sheets. Yeah, needless to say, this post spread like wildfire on the internet, and an awareness that Game of Thrones could be an actual sexual fetish became apparent. Number 4. School courses. There are only a few fantasy and sci-fi series out there that have had the distinction of having university courses created in their stead. These include the Lord of the Rings series by J.R.R. Tolkien, and Blizzard Entertainment's StarCraft computer game series as well. As of this year, however, the University of California, Berkeley has added a course to its film studies program which focuses on the hit television series Game of Thrones, going so far as to investigate the symbolism, themes, theories, and controversies that surround this HBO program. This isn't, however, the first time a school has come into the news spotlight for its association with Game of Thrones. Sometime in late 2013 or early 2014, and after asking his noisy students who watched Game of Thrones, a Belgian math teacher threatened to write down the name of dead characters from the book series when the class refused to quiet down. Needless to say, this must have been an effective tactic to control the rowdy classroom before the TV show caught up with the books. Number 3. Music. As is the case with many fandoms out there, Game of Thrones has its fair share of parody songs and fan music dedicated to the series. What makes Game of Thrones even more unique musically speaking is that HBO has released 2 mixtapes with songs by relatively prominent rap and hip-hop artists focused on the show. However, the craziest way that Game of Thrones has affected music is that it has truly launched one DJ into the spotlight. Christian Nairn, who plays the secondary character of Hodor on the show, has quite literally built a career around DJing as DJ Hodor, traveling all over the world in order to showcase his skills. Having been to one of his shows myself, he certainly knows how to throw a terrific party, and he definitely is making a success of himself thanks in no small part to his televised persona.
All that said, isn't it a little crazy to base your career in music or on YouTube on a single television series? And by that I mean, let's move on to the next point of this video.
Number 2. Baby names. One of the strangest phenomenons to emerge from the popularity of Game of Thrones is naming one's child after a character on the show. Now, it's certainly one thing to name your son or daughter Jon, Catelyn, or Robb, but it does get a little strange if you name them Daenerys, Tyrion, Drogo, or even Khaleesi. And believe it or not, the latest data entry from the Social Security Administration of the U.S. reveals that as of 2013, over 241 babies were given the name Khaleesi, a name that is more of a title, really, meaning the wife of the Khal.
Believe it or not, one of my good friends actually ran into a woman whose daughter was quite literally named Daenerys in honor of the Mother of Dragons. Now, I am certainly a huge fan of the series, but one thing I don't think I could ever do is give my child a name like that. But hey, that's just me. Anyway, on to the last point of this video.
Number 1, Trial by Combat. Game of Thrones fans certainly come in all shapes and sizes, but perhaps the wildest way Game of Thrones has impacted one person in our world occurred in early August 2015. A New York lawyer has foregone a traditional defense and opted to ask the Supreme Court for, you guessed it, a trial by combat. After being accused of helping a client commit a, quote, fraudulent transfer, he wrote a short and poignant brief in which he states the following. The allegations made by plaintiffs, aided and abetted by their counsel, border upon the criminal. As such, the undersigned respectively requests that the court permit the undersigned to dispatch plaintiffs and their counsel to the divine providence of the Maker for him to exact his divine judgment once the undersigned has released the souls of the plaintiffs and their counsel from their corporeal bodies, personally and or by way of a champion. He basically contends that trials by combat were never outlawed in New York State or the USA as a whole, and as such, he would seek a fight to the death in order to highlight what he sees as the absurdity of the allegations made against him, just as Tyrion did on a couple of occasions on Game of Thrones, with, of course, the assistance of a champion. Now, whether the courts concede and acquiesce to his desire remains to be seen. Whilst I doubt it ever will amount to anything, the fact that this is being brought up demonstrates yet another crazy way Game of Thrones has affected some ardent fans of the series in the real world.
Well, folks, those were just some of my thoughts on 5 crazy ways Game of Thrones has impacted some of us in the real world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share it and like it, and of course, subscribe to my channel if you so choose. More importantly, what do you think of these aforementioned points, though? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there any other crazy ways Game of Thrones has impacted the real world that I haven't mentioned in this video and that you can think of? And if so, let me know in the comment section below. Anyway, that's all for now, folks. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.